Well, folks, yeah, this is kind of a super early video on Tuesday because Nintendo has updated their financials. And look, guys, if you're a doomer out there that thinks Switch 2 had a horrendous holiday season, and not only that, is actually on its way to flopping, well, the news Nintendo dropped tonight, going over the third quarter sales, updating the lifetime to date stuff with Switch 2. Let's just say, good luck spinning this one. Nintendo kind of dominated, and it's really impressive what we're seeing here. Remember how Nintendo projected just 15 million sell-in for the entire fiscal year? Well, there's still 3 months left in the fiscal year, and they've already surpassed that with sell-through. Yeah, folks, pretty wild what's going on here. We got some crazy numbers to get into, software sales updates, and yes, there is one bit of bad news in here. Maybe you could already guess what game in particular did not do well, and probably going to see some headlines from some of the doomers out there on that one. And then because it's really hard to argue that anything else here looks bad, but we'll dive into this here after I remind you, hey, we are on a road to 200,000 subscribers. If you're enjoying this news and being updated literally as soon as I possibly could on all of this stuff with Nintendo, I would appreciate subscribing to the channel. We're on a road to 200K. It starts by getting to 162, however, and keeping that 1,000 subscriber count bumping up, and we will obviously take care of business around here. Let's get right into the financial by first going over the results explanatory material, and then we're going to look at just the software charts, the top selling software charts for the Nintendo Switch 2. And then on top of that, we have some additional comparison information and charts from a person who likes to put this stuff together. I'm really excited to show you all this stuff, so let's just dive right in. So the financial results, we're not going to go over all of the raw like financial numbers and stuff. I'll make a couple notes along the way because I've already looked at some of this. As an example, the operating profit ratio is down. This has to do with the fact that, hey, they're not selling as much software necessarily because they're building a new install base. And obviously, Switch 2, the hardware is less profitable. You see, Nintendo had like a 25% operating profit ratio before, but hey, this is obviously launching a new system. 15% is still really high, almost 16% compared to the whole industry when you look at it. You can kind of see a breakdown here on the consolidated sales. You can see the Americas, that's North and South, make up 40.3%, followed obviously by Europe and then Japan and other, which has actually grown mostly because they're in some new territories with Switch 2. You can see the hardware and software sales here. This is where things get interesting. So the sell-in numbers. So these are just what has been shipped out and already bought by retailers and direct-to-consumer. Nintendo Switch 2 is at 17.37 million units. That is insane. Nintendo Switch was actually able to also have 3.25 million. It moved a little bit over 1 million units. It is actually now the fastest selling Nintendo console of all time, or the best selling Nintendo console of all time. We'll get into that. You can see 14 million here for Mario Kart World. You're seeing 4.25 million there for Donkey Kong Bonanza, probably on its way to potentially getting to 5 million plus, which I think would be a good spot for Bonanza to be in. You're also seeing a breakdown here with Legends ZA with the 8.41 and the 3.89 million respective to different platforms, the 8.41 being Switch 1, the 3.89 being Switch 2. And you can see the quarterly hardware sales trends obviously kind of dominating for Nintendo Switch 2 in terms of the hardware. Obviously, software is going to be way ahead for Switch 1 because the install base is much larger. Digital sales are obviously quite interesting. We're seeing a breakdown here. Proportion of digital sales, 51%, 50% for the year. Yeah, digital sales make up a big deal. And there's actually a little thing we can go over later showing that digital sales are actually increasing even on packaged software. So for those that are in denial of the all-digital future, well, you know, it's going to come. It's just not this generation. As we go down here, we see the gross profits and all that. Obviously, Nintendo and their financial people, the investors, want to look into all of this. We're not caring so much about this. This is obviously all for investors. We just want to get to how well things actually sold. So as we get down here, this is, you know, this is crazy. They did not update their forecast, right? So their fiscal year forecast is still 19 million, which they are well on their way to getting. They might even surpass it. We'll see. I don't know. You know, maybe Mario Tennis, maybe Pokopia ends up pushing units pretty hard. Pokopia is the one that I think is kind of a wild card. Not really an interesting game to me, but there is like a huge audience for those kind of games. It's one of those games I just can't really gauge how popular it's going to be, but we'll see. Anyways, obviously things are looking pretty good here. Obviously, they projected 4 million for Switch. They're not changing that projection. All right. So let's go ahead and go down. This is the chart here that honestly, when you see the 17 number, you know that people are going to try to twist it to be like, well, that's sell in, not sell through. Well, how about this? Cumulative global sell through of the fourth week of December, at least through the fourth week of December 2025, 15 million units. It's the fastest selling dedicated video game platform released by Nintendo to date. So there's not a single Nintendo platform that is sold through as quickly as Nintendo Switch 2. And you could see, even if you include the holidays for Nintendo Switch, it's ahead of that as well. So yeah, Switch 2 is obviously doing very, very, very well right now. And I got to remind everyone, folks, they projected 15 million sell in for the fiscal year when the fiscal year started for Switch 2. They have that in sell through, and we still have 3 months of sales data to go. All right, historical hardware sales, sell in, and annual player users. Nintendo Switch has reached the highest sales volume of any hardware ever. That is right. Nintendo Switch has officially surpassed the DS to become the best-selling hardware of all time. This was always inevitable. The question is always, can it pass the PlayStation 2 for the best-selling hardware ever? We don't know. We'll have to wait and see how sales do over the next year or two, if Nintendo discontinues Switch 1 at some point, etc. Obviously, the price has gone up on Switch 1 due to all the various economic reasons going on. That's probably going to hurt his chances at that, but we'll see. Over 100 million annual playing users, continuing the trend from last year. So right here, they went down just a smidge, but they're launching a new system. We'll see. Still being able to maintain 129, 130, maybe 130 is like the peak, and they're not really going to be able to surpass that one day, but you never know. As we go down, obviously, they go over the various first-party offerings they have, and, Switch 2 titles planned for release first-party-wise. Animal Crossing's already out. Obviously, we have Mario Tennis Fever coming up, Pokopia. We obviously have in March as well, Super Mario, Bros. Wonder Switch 2 edition, the Bella Bella Park. Then we have Yoshi and the Mysterious Book coming out in the spring, Fire Emblem, and then Splatoon Raiders, which is TBD, might not even be this year. We'll have to wait and see. First party titles for the Switch. Obviously, we see Tamagotchi Life, Rhythm Heaven, and Pokemon Champions. Coming down here, you see the third party games. You see Final Fantasy VII that recently came out. Obviously, we have Dragon Quest this week, Yakuza 3 next week. Reanimal as well next week, Resident Evil Requiem coming later, Fatal Frame 2 in March. You're seeing obviously all the titles there. So many great ones, Pragmata, etc., etc. Lots of good stuff. The Adventures of Ellie, there's a demo up for that. You guys should go check it out. Now, Initiative's leveraging Nintendo IP. This is kind of neat. The movie, obviously, we know is coming. This is what they've got so far going on for the 40th anniversary. Whether there's more or not, we don't know yet. And you can see some of the reference materials here. And there's some interesting stuff in the reference materials. In particular, they break down, obviously, the per area sales and all that. This is where you can get to some of the digital sales, where you kind of see a 59, 51, 46. So interesting, as we come down here. The hardware sales, this is 4.7 million. This is in that units and tens of thousands. So this is 4.7, almost 4.8 in Japan for Switch 2. Obviously 5.9, nearly 6 million in the Americas. This includes North and South, Canada, all that stuff. 4.1 million in Europe, 2.5 million. This is what I mean. They've kind of grown in other territories because they're in certain territories Switch 1 wasn't before. So this number is actually pretty big, maybe bigger than people realize. But yeah, obviously gets you to your 1.7. Now that is obviously not the sell through numbers. They don't break that down by territory. This is just sell in. So they got a couple million out there worldwide on store shelves as we entered 2026. But that's, you consider worldwide, that's actually not too crazy. You come down here and you can obviously see, the first party titles, Mario Kart World sitting really well, Bonanza sitting really well, and here we got Kirby Air Riders, 1.76 million. Now, this is only technically sell in, not sell through. They don't offer sell through data on games usually, but I want to note that is actually ahead. That is already ahead of Kirby Air Riders on GameCube, or Kirby Air Ride on GameCube, I guess I should say. So this sequel, the complete version of the vision for this game, has outsold the original already on technically a smaller install base because it hasn't crossed GameCube numbers yet. So I gotta say, that's actually pretty good. And I think it makes the third Kirby spinoff to be a million seller. So that's really good. It's actually trending to sell as well as Kirby traditionally sells, which is like 2 to 3 million, like the mainline side scrolling ones. Obviously, we know Forgotten Land, the 3D ones took it to new levels, but for, have Kirby Air Riders even do those kind of numbers is nice. And then you can see all the numbers, obviously, for Nintendo Switch. And what's really cool is you see, 2.42 million for Super Mario Galaxy 2. That's actually a pretty solid number. See 2.28 for Galaxy 1. So there you go. Kind of interesting. Obviously, that was a big one back in October. All right, launch dates for primary Nintendo products. Not a whole lot here. This is just going over games that already came out last year. And then obviously games coming out this year that we kind of already went over. So not a whole lot to really dive into. And so that's it for that data there. And what I wanted to do here quick is show the software on Nintendo's So as we look here, you can see Mario Kart World. This is up to their million seller list, their top 10 best-selling games published by Nintendo. I see Mario Kart World, you see Bonanza, you see Pokemon Legends Z, and you see Kirby. Obviously, these are the only games that have crossed the million. Really happy to see these games on here. Obviously, I presume some of these games will get bumped off over time and be replaced with even better selling ones as we get deeper in Mario Kart World. I'm very curious if it ever relinquishes the number one spot. But we'll see. It's no longer being bundled. I mean, I know you can still find some bundles out there, but once they're sold out, there is no more. So we'll have to wait and see on that front. Now, what I wanted to do is do some comparisons here. And thankfully, we have a really nice guy over on X that does some pretty good comparisons with sales data, and that is Pierre485. So we're going to go over here, and it says Nintendo Switch 2 shipped 7.01 million units, now over 17.37 units in 7 months. It's the third. It's the best third quarter for any Nintendo system. Now, to be clear, they haven't launched a bunch of systems in June, so you got to take that, for what it is. Kind of twisting data a smidge there to make it look good, but it's impressive either way. You can see obviously the first 2 quarters plus the third quarter. That's really, really huge numbers there. Obviously, no supply constraints or any of that. And you can see the Switch 2 hardware by region, just a nicer looking chart than Nintendo gave. And then worldwide hardware here, you can see it's already passed the Wii U, well on its way to passing GameCube at some point this year. And the way things are going, might even pass the N64 during year 2 at some point there. And then if trends continue, possibly the Super Nintendo passed in year 3 and starting to kind of glance at those, NES numbers. And then we got to start getting to some of the handhelds here like 3DS. So we'll see, though. Obviously, that's future projecting. We're obviously not at that point right now. Now, this is where we got to get into some other stuff here where it says, Nintendo shipped all this for another 17.31 million games on Switch 2 for a total of 37.93 million units to date. That is something we went over. But this is cool here. So we have some Pokemon Legends ZA stuff. So it shipped 12.3 million units. And what I want to note about this shipment when you combine the sales together is when you actually look at Legends ZA's 12.3 million in 77 days, while that is a little bit on the market longer, about a couple weeks longer than obviously Legends Arceus, when you look at the data, only about 300,000 units behind. Obviously, it's not selling as well as Arceus. It's probably not going to sell as well as Arceus, but it is Pokemon. 12.3 million, probably going to creep up to 15 million total lifetime at some point. Can't really complain about that. I think it's pretty good there because see, 12.64 was in 63 days, 12.3 was in 77. And you can see it actually compares kind of nice to BDSP, and actually better than Let's Go, although it was on the market a little bit longer. When you look at it, it might creep up and pass Let's Go eventually for lifetime. We'll have to wait and see on that front. You can see the Super Mario Galaxy shipped 2.28 million units in 3 months. So we went over this before, but you can kind of see how this compares to other ones. Obviously, fairly low besides like the DS 64 version of Mario 64, but there you go. I mean, obviously, I don't know if people think these are good numbers or not. You'll have to, do the math yourself and think, I don't know. I don't know if you consider it to be good numbers. That's going to be on everyone else to decide here. Kirby Air Riders with the 1.76 million units. And this is where, you can see, hey, man, return. See the DX here? Not too bad. Outsold Planet Robobot, Mass Attack, obviously also Air Ride, outsold Amazing Mirror, Tilt and Tumble, Superstar, Actually, even outsold Adventure. So I'm just saying, obviously, Kirby Air Riders, I think Nintendo is seeing that as a pretty big success when you just look at the charts. Next up, we got Donkey Kong Bonanza, shipped 760K units during its second quarter for a total of 4.25 million. And you can see, obviously, some comparisons here for Q3, Q4. Pretty big drop off. We'll have to wait and see if in Q5 they can, get 500,000 or so sales, trying to keep it a little bit evergreen, but we'll have to wait and see. You can see for the Donkey Kong series where Bonanza ranks, and it actually doesn't rank too bad, all things considered. Obviously behind Tropical Freeze, DK Returns, and the original Donkey Kong Country, but ranking really well next to Land, Land 2, Land 3, even Donkey Kong 64, probably on pace to potentially pass Donkey Kong 64, pass Donkey Kong Country 3. So, we'll have to wait and see if it can pass the N64 version of DK64, but it's doing well. It's not doing too bad. Now we get to, obviously, Mario Kart World. Sold another 4.46 million in that quarter. Fastest selling title in franchise history ahead of Mario Kart Wii. And it's also the 5th best selling game in the franchise, surpassing Mario Kart 64 already. Pretty crazy. You can see the sales here. Absolutely insane sales. And it's right up there. It surpassed Mario Kart Wii as the fastest. So it's pretty crazy. Obviously, it's bundled in. That does help. Mario Kart series, obviously, it is looking really, really good for where it might end up at. All right. And then obviously the million seller list that we kind of showed before. This is just another look at it. And then obviously, it gets to the Switch itself that shipped 1.36 million units. Obviously down quite a bit from last year, but it's no longer the lead platform, but it is the best-selling hardware in Nintendo history. You can see here, barely passing the DS, but it did pass it. And you can see cumulative sales. Sales is going DS kind of died off a couple years earlier, while Switch kept going up a bit. And just in terms of aligned, for years and months out on the market. And the base model and all this stuff. This stuff I don't care as much about, but the data's here for anyone that wants to look at it. So I think that's pretty interesting. In the end, guys, there's a little bit of data here on Switch 1 games that I'm not quite as interested in. I just want to note that it's undeniable how incredible these numbers are. I feel like, we've been hearing for months, at least a month now, this entire month of January, at least we're in February now, about how bad Nintendo sales are from so many different people trying to mock Nintendo and make fun of them. And there is one aspect that we can, and that is that Metroid Prime 4 did not pop up. And I don't say mock or make fun. We don't have any sales data for Metroid Prime 4. And the reason we don't is because Nintendo only gives sales data for games when they cross 1 million in sales. And that might happen this next fiscal quarter here. It is possible that maybe it passes 1 million then, but Metroid Prime 4 did not sell at least 1 million units in December. And for a game that reportedly cost over $100 million, one of the most expensive games Nintendo's ever made, that's not good. Could mark the end of the Metroid Prime series, to be honest, unless Nintendo just doesn't care about tossing away money to try again for Prime 5. And I'm just saying this out loud because, look, as incredible as the sales are, there is that one caveat that Metroid Prime 4, I think Nintendo views it as a pretty big flop that it couldn't even sell 1 million units worldwide in December. That might be it for Metroid Prime. We don't know. Obviously, that could be jumping the gun here, but just based on what we're seeing and how expensive it is to make Metroid Prime, that might be all she wrote. And I know Tanabe on his way out from Nintendo said, hey, this is supposed to be a new trilogy of Metroid Prime games. But he always said he hoped they get to do it. He wasn't promising they get to do it because in the end, it comes down to sales. And Metroid, at least from the 3D perspective, isn't selling well. And it looks like it's on pace to sell worse than prior Prime games. So we'll have to wait and see, of course. Maybe it has legs. I don't know. I don't know if it has legs, but maybe it does. I just hope it crosses 1 million someday. So then Nintendo gives us actual sales numbers for it. But either way, that's the one caveat here that doesn't look good. Setting aside Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, which again, disappointed a lot of people and didn't really review as great as people hoped. Setting that aside, because again, we got to be fair and throw that in there as, hey, there's actually a little flag here. But that flag is more so for the Metroid series and Metroid Prime, not for the entire success of Switch 2. Switch 2 is doing really well. I think there's no way you can look at these numbers and be like, oh man, what that historically terrible holiday season, just massively over exaggerated. Now, I'm not saying it outsold Switch in the US, especially in particular for its very first holiday season, or even worldwide for its first holiday season. I'm not going there. You can compare holiday to holiday and see that yes, Switch 1 did outsell Nintendo Switch 2 in its first holiday. That's undeniable. That is a fact. What's also undeniable is this is the fastest selling system ever. And it's been that way since day one. And on top of that, it has sold through 15 million in a fiscal year. They did that in like 7 months. I just have to reiterate this one more freaking time. That is more units than Nintendo Switch sold in 10 months in 2017. And that is more units sold through than Nintendo had projected when they started this fiscal year to sell in for the entire fiscal year. And they're well on pace to hit the 19 million. So that they're projecting now, their new projection for the fiscal year. So I don't know, guys. I think it's undeniable that Switch 2 is clearly doing really, really well. Yes, it could do better. I guess that's the argument that, hey, if they did this, it did that, maybe it does better. I said this whole time entering into this, if you paid attention to my live streams, you paid attention to my videos, that I thought Nintendo, when they reported this, everyone's out there putting this negative stuff out there, yet Nintendo's sitting in their tower going, I don't know why everyone's panicking, man. We're sitting very pretty. And there's an outside shot. It probably won't happen, but if Pokopia is bigger than I think it will be, if Mario Tennis is bigger than I think it'll be, there's a little bit of an outside shot. They hit 20 million sold in this fiscal year, but we'll have to wait and see. Clearly, Switch 2 is doing incredibly well, and the signs of it dying and being doomed and Nintendo's in trouble. Good luck spinning this one. I know you guys will find a way, you doomers out there, but the rest of us are looking at the data and going, damn. Switch 2 is doing all right. Now we just got to get some directs, get some more game announcements, and get hyped for the rest of the year. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I am Nathaniel Rovajets from Nintendo Prime. I hope you appreciate me staying up late to get this one out, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.